deceptive, manipulative.
He's also a former social worker and a political campaign activist.
Some people in town say the base is run by aliens working with our federal government to conduct mind control and genetic experiments.
I'm leaving. I'm glad. Thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Eerie Americas. This is Vicky Ayala.
And this is Kristi Hull. What's up, Vix?
Well, I can tell you what I'm not doing. I am not storming Area 51 today.
Before we started recording, I'm like, Vix, have you checked it? Have you checked it? She's like, what? I'm like, live updates of like what's going on at Area 51 when everyone's storming it. And she's like, oh no, let's talk about it. So just in case you're not filled in, basically people are still showing up despite the government warning. They have like an EDM festival going on right now. So it's there every year. This kind of just coincided, but they're saying it's quadrupled in the size and people are getting close enough to the gate and taking selfies. So that's closer than I ever anticipated. I thought like on site they'd be shot. So congrats to you guys.
We're not getting shot.
Vicky and I are not brave enough to go. But
I value my life a little bit. And as much as I want to know what the hell is going on there, I'm pretty sure that you're not going to find anything out. Yes. And we've watched the videos of people like trying to drive, even driving down the road leading up to Area 51, and they were like confronted by military police. So I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah. You know, I grew up in the military, so that specific thing, I know that they get away with shooting people, no problem. So I'm good. You know, like they're going to have a justifiable excuse when they've warned you. It's kind of the same rule when you step in. Most states or red states, I guess, have that. If they're in your property, you can get shot. It's the same mentality for the government. So I'm personally good. I know that aliens exist. I know that they're doing research there. That's why it's so secretive. I don't really need to see it with my own eyes. I know it for a fact. So I'm personally good.
I'm good. And plus, I'm going to a Blink-182 concert tonight, and we all know that Tom like believes in it, and I'm sure he's going to have his own commentary. And I have enough of his UFO videos that were validated by the Navy. So there we go. I don't think I need to actually go to Area 51.
And not to mention, we do this podcast. We look up alien abductions, alien everything all the time. Like, we kind of get the gist of it at this point. Like, you're really well seasoned. I just think these are for people that are brave and bored, that, you know, want to see if they can actually get away with it. And, like, congrats on the balls on you, man. Like, that's all I'm saying.
Or people who just, like, don't mind being, like, taken by aliens if it does happen. I, again, have done some of these. I've done a case here. I don't want to get abducted by aliens. It doesn't sound fun to me, and I would like to not be experimented on by an alien. Like, I'm good. Like I said, we know they exist, but I don't want to be kidnapped by one. I don't want to be an experiment. I'm good.
Yeah, I already feel like an experiment. I don't need to. My parents having me was an experiment, so I'm good.
You're also like a medical marvel with all of your allergies and like not knowing you only had one kidney until you were like an adult. Like, I just, that's just like so weird.
Yeah, I'm an alien already. I'm good. So, but yeah, let's get into our episode.
But, all right, so I'm going to get into a Reddit. It's from, of course, my favorite community, Creepy Stories. And the user is Grace P25. And this is actually a pretty recent one. It was posted only like 3 weeks ago. So I live in a house in the outskirts of Los Angeles, and I was coming home from a night shift around 2 a.m. and was making some coffee with my favorite TV show on the television. Then I noticed that the signal of my flat screen started to flicker and finally disappear. Of course, I thought it must be my antenna. I said to myself, making my way to the roof to fix the antenna. Then I noticed it, a medium tall humanoid figure with black and cyan blue skin staring at me. I had a heart attack. I saw it. Its skin was crumbled and looking like toast you forgot in the toaster, which is it's a very graphic description. Yeah. Its one eye was closed or hidden under its overlapping skin, and its second one was staring at me. It was looking at me for 4, maybe 5 seconds. Then the TV got a signal again, and the thing vanished. I'll never forget that night. This is why you don't go to the roof to fix anything.
Yeah, actually, Charlie just got a job in roofing sales. I can't wait for him to hear that one, because I'm going to be like, make sure you're out before the sun goes down, because I don't need you coming up to me talking about that stuff, because then I will refuse you this position forever. Like, it's not going to happen. So, yeah, no, and that sounds very much like a humanoid, like all those stories you hear about, or like all those creepy Jeepers Creepers type of things that you've seen. It's weird how Hollywood and film and stuff depict it so accurately. You know what I mean? Like you already get a visual in your head of what it is. So
I just think
really
it's crazy
creepy.
that this person like got close enough or was able to see the description of the skin, because normally they flash by you so quickly. Like you get a description that they're tall, their feet are weird, like something like that, but very rarely do you get like a description of like their skin and where their eyes are. So I'm like, this is very interesting that it even stared at you long enough for you to get this description. But this is exactly why I don't do anything that requires an antenna on a roof. And if I had that, I would not be going to the roof myself to fix it. If my TV goes out, I'm not watching shit that day. It's just not meant to be.
We have a tablet, we have a phone. There's so many other options. Screw it. So
Laptop.
definitely. All right. So I'm actually going to get into something I don't think we've covered yet, a spree killing. I think that's kind of new for this series. I don't think we've actually done it. And this one's actually close to Vicky and I's heart, and not in a good way, because it really did scare the shit out of us. And we'll get into it right now. As Brooklynites, we have all heard of past stories of killers that have stalked and psychologically tormented residents in our area. Well, my former area. David Berkowitz, aka the son of Sam, Albert Fish, the vampire of Brooklyn. But there's one monster Vicky and I lived through that terrorized us here south of Manhattan, who killed 4 people in a drug-fueled rage that ended with his capture in the most dramatic fashion on his 28th hour with a bloody confrontation with police in Times Square. This is the insane killing spree of Maxim Geldom, or as the media dubbed him, Mad Max of Brooklyn. Maxim Gelman was born on May 31st, 1987 in the Ukraine Soviet Union. So he is a Russian, USSR. Gelman's father had immigrated here in 1994. Max and his mom, Svetlana, joined his dad 2 years later, and they all settled in a very densely immigrated, populated area known as Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn, New York. Not very far from my favorite co-host, Vic. So she's really close to there. And weirdly enough, around this time, I was living the next neighborhood over, which was Brighton Beach. Gelman's father returned to the Ukraine once he got his U.S. citizenship, but Svetlana and Max decided to stay in Brooklyn.
That's so weird. Who gets their citizenship and then goes back?
I have no idea. And what's even stranger is that it's not clear if his dad was in some sort of trouble that may have led to his departure from the Ukraine originally, because once his father returned to the Ukraine, he was killed. So not very clear of what it was.
That doesn't sound great.
And my thing is like, okay, I understand having to escape for whatever reason, but then why go back? You know,
right.
Like that's
did you think the danger was over? You thought it was bad enough to bring your whole family here, get citizenship, which we know because our parents are immigrants, takes years to get. If you guys don't know that, it's not like I come here and go get my citizenship. It takes years to get your citizenship. So you went through the whole process. It's not an easy process, not a cheap process. It's also very expensive just to go back to get killed. Like that just sounds very, very strange to me.
Yeah, very sus. And weirdly, you say that too. Max and Svetlana arrived in 1994. Maxim gained his U.S. citizenship in 2005. So at this point, he's already like grown-ass person. You know what I mean? Like it takes years for a lot of that. Eventually, his mother remarries to a man named Alexander Kuznetsov when he was a teenager. And needless to say, Gelman was not a fan of his stepfather. On the show, The Killer Speaks, he says of his stepfather, quote, "I developed a disgust for him because he would drink and he wouldn't be respectful certain times to my mother, and I didn't like that." The truth is that he was jealous of competing for love from his mom, who I'm sure prior to her remarriage was very close to him, as she was his only parent. So the dynamic was hostile from the get-go between them.
No matter who it was, he wasn't going to like the person. They could have been the best in the world, and he wouldn't have liked them.
Absolutely, it wouldn't have mattered. And besides which, as you'll see as we go further, his personality would never allow anyone to sidestep him. So that's just who he is. Gelman was technically unemployed, but if you asked him, he would tell you he was employed all right. Police later did verify this, but he was a mid-level drug dealer who sold coke, oxy, meth, you know, pretty much whatever he can get his hands on.
I love that it's mid-level. You're not even like high level, you're mid-level.
Yeah, like you're basically someone's bitch. But one thing you have to understand before I get into this individual is that Gelman is a defined sociopath. According to Psychology Today, a sociopath is a term that refers to a pattern of antisocial behaviors and attitudes, including manipulative and deceitful behavior, often arising from environmental factors. Sociopaths may or may not be criminals, but they are often difficult to identify until one is very familiar with their behavior. Sociopaths are often manipulative, life frequently, lack empathy, have a weak conscience that allows them to act recklessly or aggressively, even though what they know they're doing is wrong. Knowing that Gelman is a sociopath, you have to take his version of reality very lightly. So a lot of the quotes that I got were from when the killer speaks, and his version versus what the defined witness and police statement very much lack, of course, as most criminals will lie just to try to make themselves look better, but he's pretty candid about certain things, which is also really eerie. While he told the camera on his interview in the show A Killer Speaks, he claims to be this Russian Scarface type of guy who was hustling and making real money. His nickname on the streets was Wes. So a lot of the times you'll hear people refer to him as Wes. And yes, West without the T. That's what you're hearing, Wes.
Not the direction, just Wes.
Yeah, no Kanye here. But people on the street knew him as sort of a leech, only selling to keep up his meth, PCP, and who knows what else habit. So I think he was one of those people that realized he had a drug problem, and the only way to upkeep it was to sell drugs. So
right, but like,
is that really a drug dealer?
It's not really. First of all, it's not a drug dealer. You're just like a drug maintainer. Like you're just trying to maintain your own habit, and you know that you can't afford to buy it, so you figure, let me sell it. But I just think it's crazy, and this is how you know that their minds don't work the right way. He was obviously a drug addict, but you ask him and he's just like, I sold drugs, I'm this, I'm that. I'm like, you're trying to make himself sound better. Dude, you were a drug addict. You were addicted to it. It was for you. You're not sitting here like this big time drug dealer on like power that's like selling to everyone. You were just trying to maintain your own habit.
Absolutely. And you got to remember, like Vicky and I grew up in the part when Brooklyn was hard. It's now a Whole Foods, mushy, kombucha loving place. But before it was really, really hard. And the streets had a different kind of mentality. And most mid to high level drug dealers look down on the people that sell to them. So
they're not on it. They actually look down to the people that they're selling to.
Yeah, so for you to sit there and be like, oh, I'm a Scarface, I was hard, but you're like doing angel dust every day, that is kind of a contradiction.
That's just like, that movie itself is a contradiction, because in Scarface all he does is a bunch of coke, and I'm like, no big drug dealer would ever use their own supply, because that's money. Why would you sniff your own money up your nose? Like, that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, definitely. And before this, Gelman's only priors involved petty things like graffiti, harassment, robbery, but nowhere near what he says in terms of being some big mover in Brooklyn. That's some BS. He just wants to sell for his rep. It's an inflated ego to hide his low self-esteem, as many sociopaths do. So, he can't just face facts, like we said. He was also in love, hardcore in love, with a girl he used to party with / sell to, 20-year-old Yelena Bulchenko, also a local Brooklyn girl, very much like myself and Vicky. Yelena, when she met who she referred to as Wes, was in what most people go through at 2021, a party phase. She wasn't a crack or meth head. She had a job. She was skipping school but was still attending. She had a deep relationship with her mom and friends, and maybe went a little deeper into the drug scene, but she was slowly phasing herself out and saw Gelman less and less. So just to factor that in, you'll hear a lot of mixed reviews about who she was as a person. I actually know someone that knew her and her family, and that's basically what it was. It was just a phase. And she unfortunately got the attention of somebody who was a psychopath
person. And it's just so crazy how psychopaths don't care about anyone, but he wanted to act like he was in love with her. Like, you weren't in love with her. You just had like a weird obsession, because you're not capable of loving someone when you're a sociopath.
Definitely. And another downside to this, Yelena lived 4 blocks away from Wes's home, which will come up later. So just keep that in mind. She had a boyfriend and made it clear she only liked him as a friend. In reality, she was more likely using him for drugs at the time, because she told her boyfriend, Gerard Hornig, she was scared of Gelman. So you're not friends with someone you're scared of. That's not a real thing. Like, how can you have an authentic relationship with someone that you're fearful of? It just sounds like it was an opportunity that, any female could take advantage of somebody that is obsessed with you. You know what I mean? Why wouldn't you use that? That's your sick logic at the time. You know what I mean? It doesn't make it right, but it's what happened.
People have done it. Everybody's done it. Some guy has a crush on you and you let him buy you things. Like, it just happens. But also, if she really was genuinely scared of him, she might have been afraid of cutting off whatever type of relationship they had. So she probably figured, let me stay in his good graces. Let me not do anything to piss him off. And at least you're getting drugs out of it. Like, it makes sense.
That's a really good point too. I didn't even think about that. He clearly couldn't get over it as he texted and called her constantly. And somewhere along the tunnel line, so like in Brooklyn, if anyone's never been there, there's old train tracks where the MTA used to go pretty much from my old neighborhood, close to Vicky, close to another friend of ours in Sheepshead. So people go down there and tag things and do graffiti. A lot of homeless people sleep there. It's just like an abandoned tunnel area. He had done a huge graffiti canvas that looked more like a shrine space with her name Yelena written across a huge wall under a heavily used overpass. This overpass will come up later as well. If you ask Wes's opinion, their relationship was much deeper than that.
Of course.
He claims that she was his driver when he did the drug drop-offs, but we all know that seems to be a load of crock of shit because her best friend, like her best friend she considered a sister, Renata Schley, said Yelena didn't have a license or even know how to drive. And it sounds weird for people that are outside of New York City, but I can tell you growing up, so many of my friends cannot drive because you don't need to drive here. You have transportation. You don't need a car here.
And where are we going? Almost everywhere is, you honestly have it, especially in Brooklyn, you have a way easier time taking the train or taking an Uber. There's literally nowhere to park in my neighborhood. And sometimes if I want to go out for a drink, I'm not going to drive. So what's the point in taking a car? So you can live your whole life in New York, in the city, and never have a license, or if you have a license, never have a car. And I feel like also like this just goes back into the whole, I was this big Russian Scarface. Who the hell has a driver? You're not that important. Like you're
really not.
Nobody has a driver here.
It's so true. As Yelena and Gelman's relationship ceased, as Yelena pulled back from the party scene, Gelman claims that his stash house was robbed, and he convinced himself, with no proof of course, that she was the culprit behind it. So I think I don't know if the robbery actually happened because you can't call the police and say my stash house was robbed. So there's no,
right.
There's no define this actually happened. But whether it happened or not, let's say hypothetically it did happen.
Because it can happen if you walk around like you're this big drug dealer, someone could rob your stash.
But why would the person who's cleaning her act up go rob you? That doesn't make any sense.
The person who's already getting it from you for free wouldn't have a reason.
Or afraid of you, or actually genuinely afraid of you. Why would that one person, and let's say it didn't happen and he's making this shit up, the reality is that he was upset that she stopped communicating with him. And that's what it is. He had to find something that made him mad at her to be able to justify his actions.
Just looking for an excuse. It's exactly what it was. Because even if she did rob his stash house, what happens later does not justify that. Absolutely.
He's just upset his love went unrequited, and he kept that in the back of his mind. Like, that's basically what it is. Like, he can say whatever he wants. He can blame her for a robbery, whatever. But the reality is he was upset. His love was not returned. He claims to have purchased a kilo of coke, and this began the night where all of this terror kind of happened. So he claims to have purchased a kilo of coke and noticed crossing the Brooklyn Bridge that there were feds following him with official plates.
Right.
FYI, important to know before you hear his version of events, the FBI later stated that until he committed the crimes I'm about to get into, they had never heard of this guy prior. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, because he's not important. Nobody heard of him.
Nobody knows who the hell you are. He freaked out and claims to have ripped open the kilo and threw it over the bridge into the water. That night, since he decided the feds were tailing him, it would be best to lay low and get out of the country. He purchased tickets to go to the Dominican Republic on February 11th, 2011, which is smart since there is no extradition in mi país. So that was pretty smart on his part. He decided to head home to say goodbye to his mother and get his passport. At roughly 5 a.m. that day, he headed home to 2830 East 27th Street and woke his mother up asking where his passport was. His mother accused him of being drunk and said he couldn't drive his stepdad's car in his state of mind. She was more likely confusing his angel dust paranoia and outbursts as alcohol-induced. So, because at this point, he's heavily into dust. Like I don't know how many people that are listening have ever experienced an event with someone on PCP, aka angel dust, but I'll give you a brief insight into PCP. It's an illegal hallucinogenic that inhibits the reuptake of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. It also inhibits the actions of glutamate by blocking NMDA receptors, which are responsible for pain sensation, emotions, learning, and memory function. So this shit fucks me.
You just don't feel it. Yeah, it's crazy. And I just like to point out, as someone who claimed they were super uber important and that they had a driver, you had to drive your stepdad's car.
Right? Why are you using the vehicle of a person you claim to hate so much? hate on somebody, but then use their car to deal drugs. What a piece of shit. Gelman previously said he used dust to, quote, relax and stay calm, which is the sensation.
That's what you take to relax.
Yeah. You take dust to relax, which is the sensation one would normally get initially, but negative effects are severe and include sound, image, and body distortion, depersonalizations of feeling of detachment, loss of sensation and inability to feel pain, acute anxiety, agitation, mood swings, and feelings of impending doom. Yeah, super relaxing. Long-term symptoms also include shit like irregular heartbeat, kidney failure, vision problems, paranoia, that's a big one for him, delusions, seizures, and even comas. So given all that information about PCP, his hate for his stepfather, his paranoia and delusions that the feds were following him and that he had to flee, enter his stepfather. Alexander hears all the fighting, wakes up, and begins doing what any normal husband would do, defends his wife's actions and agrees with her as he begins to scream at Russian at his stepson. This is the moment paranoia transfers over to the darkest depth of rage. He takes a kitchen knife and begins repeatedly stabbing his stepfather then and there in front of his mom's, No shame in his game, just started stabbing his father right in front of his mom.
Nope.
He stabbed him so much that the kitchen knife actually broke. He then reached for a carving fork and continued to stab Alexander 55 times in total.
How much in a rage do you have to be in, or how much force do you need to break a fucking kitchen knife?
And not just that, to stab somebody 55 times, the strength and the energy that would take on an average human being.
Exhausting.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But he was so full of this dust, fucking paranoia, rage, loss of sensation. I mean, I'm imagining if you break a knife off, you're hurting yourself too in the process, but he probably didn't even feel it. It's such a crazy thing to think about it in that aspect, like to really think about 55 stab wounds. It's nuts. He is screaming at his wife to call the police, and this asshole has the nerve to be surprised that his mother actually did it. He said, quote, my mother, she picked up the phone, and I said to myself, she's not going to call the police. I kept stabbing him. I didn't think nothing of it. I was shocked. My own mother calls the police on me.
Oh, how dare she?
Her husband is getting stabbed by her son. What else is she going to do? I don't understand what he was thinking was she supposed to help him get rid of the body? Like, what did he honestly think that this was?
That she was going to be like, okay, son, no problem.
And then he goes on to say, quote, I love my mother. I would never hurt my mother. And I'm sure they asked him, why didn't you think about killing your mom at that point? Because why wouldn't you? That she's a witness. But that just goes to show you like how disoriented his mind was. So he takes his stepdad's keys and bails out of there. Gelman then sped off his dead stepfather's vehicle, running over an unarmed crossing guard and breaking her leg.
She's just doing her job, minding her business, and gets run over.
Mm-hmm. And weirdly enough, in a lot of the stuff you'll look into, you don't even really hear about this person because she went unnamed. She didn't want to be like publicly identified. But yeah, that was the first injury outside of the first death, the first murder. By about 7 a.m., police learned from Gelman's mom that he is driving a 2004 silver Lexus, and the manhunt for him begins. About 3 hours after the murder, Gelman has fled the city. He's basically out of the city when this dumbass turns around and heads back to Sheep's Head. Why?
I don't know.
Now, I don't know about all of you guys listening, but I know if Vicky or I killed someone, we wouldn't drive back to the same city where we just killed a person. I'm no criminal mastermind, but going back to the scene of crime.
I think you would know better than that. Like, we're not like, but like also like the whole point, that whole argument where you led to kill your stepfather started because you wanted his car to take your passport and go to DR. So wasn't that your whole thing? Why the hell were you coming back? Like, your whole point was to get the hell out of the country. And then you're like, forget it. And I'm just going to go back.
We're trying to understand somebody that is illogical and a sociopath. So we're never
going to understand
this perspective.
So, like, never going to get it.
What was his logic behind coming back? Get this. He claims since the feds are on him and he, quote, caught a body, and all the people who he says turns him into the feds, they were rats. So they would have to go down if he was going down. Like, basically, he was ready to take them out. He's like, if I'm going down, they're coming with me.
So he already knew he was going to get caught.
Yeah.
So he's like, before I get caught, let me just go ham. And
this motherfucker uses his stepdad's murder as a catalyst to seek revenge on people he believes have done him dirty. He uses the surge of adrenaline for his own version of deranged justice. Remember, in his mind, Yelena was the reason his stash house was robbed. So he's already ready to just be like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm taking everybody down with me. He claimed there were 4 or 5 people on his Kill Bill style roster of vengeance, but he first went back to Yelena's house, which, as many of you remember, is roughly 4 blocks from his home, aka the murder scene. Now, people that have never been to New York, for every 5 or 6 people you see, there is a cop somewhere in there. So this is a murder scene. Half of all the precincts in Brooklyn are going to be there. You know what I mean? Like 4 blocks away.
For people who don't live in New York, is extremely close. It's not like in other places where you have a mile before you reach the next block or the next house. 4 blocks away is essentially like a 5-minute walk. Like it's not even a 5-minute walk. It is literally right there.
It's about the size of a football field, if that, maybe half of it. I don't know. I don't fucking know football. He bangs on Yelena's door, and her mother, Anna Blumchenko, who worked from home, answered the door. She was on the phone with a customer, and the person actually heard the whole scuffle. Gelman asked Anna where Yelena was and thought to himself, may as well get her mother. So even if he had found out, his intention was to kill her.
He was going to kill the mom anyway.
Absolutely. The customer said they heard her angrily answering whoever knocked, following like loud voices, yelling, screaming, and eventually the sound of Anna's torture. He was slowly stabbing her, asking where Yelena was. She said if he stopped stabbing her, she would tell him. Instead, she used the opportunity to try to flee from Gelman, who did catch up. She's basically tried to talk him into it. She said, if you stop stabbing me, I'll tell you where Yelena is. Instead, she used the opportunity to try to flee from Gelman, who did catch up. The entire time he held her captive, she refused to give up her daughter's location. Like, this woman is a G in my mind. Like,
she really is. She's a badass. And I think she knew he was going to kill her anyway. So it's like, if you're going to kill me anyway, I'm not fucking telling you where she is.
Even Gelman said once she was near death, she told him defiantly, quote, I'll never tell you where my daughter is. Gelman disgustingly even gave her credit, stating that she, quote, died with honor.
Oh, well, thank you for telling us that.
Asshole. Yeah, like we needed your fucking approval about it. We don't need to know that what she did was honorable. And I would only expect that from a mother. You know what I mean? Like no one else. If you were being tortured and they were asking you about me, I wouldn't be surprised. You know what I mean? But like for one of our friends that are moms, if their daughter or son were in this situation, they would die too. You know what I mean?
I'd hold out as long as I could, Christina, to not give your location.
I promise. There's only one thing that would really probably make me tell, because I can't stand this particular thing, but I'm not going to say it because
I know.
I have a captor listening.
Right? He's going to be like, I just have to do this.
After killing Anna, Gelman takes off to try to find Yelena, but said he was looking for others he wanted to kill, supposedly. So he's just kind of like storming the streets, trying to find someone that he has beef with.
Which
Yelena,
apparently is everybody, because...
Everybody.
Everybody?
Yeah, everybody. Apparently this guy had beef with 4 or 5 people. I don't even have a kill list that. Like, if there's anyone I'm going to kill, if I ever got a freebie, like the Purge style, I don't even have that many people on my list.
I don't. That's the thing. I watched the Purge and I'm like, I don't even have anybody I care. Like, I do that too. Like, I don't have a kill list. I have like a you annoy me list.
Right. I have a I don't talk to you list, but I don't have
an actual kill list. I don't even have beef with anybody.
Yeah, but we're boring normal people. So
right? Like, damn it, we're not sociopaths. We don't have a kill list.
Yelena, who was at work, started to head home after her friend Renata texted her about Wes being on the loose when she saw his photo. So off the bat, you know it's bad when your best friend sees someone you're afraid of and is like, yo, guess what's going on right now? You know, like that's really, it must have been such a horrifying moment for her. When Yelena reached her door, she was actually on the phone with her best friend Renata and told her she would call her back once she was inside. It would be the last time Renata would speak to her best friend she considered a sister. Yelena discovers her mother's body and ran outside to call the cop. Of course you would. Why would you stay inside? You know,
right. I would run outside.
But why? Why was Gelman driving around her block at the only time she was waiting for the cops is one of those gnawing questions. If I ever get a chance, I will ask my maker why that happened. But yeah, he saw her. He approached her with a knife hidden in his jacket, and she says his nickname, Wes, almost as a scary question, and took off running. A neighbor tried to intervene, and Yelena is pulling this neighbor closer to her, screaming, he's gonna fucking kill me. Imagine like you're sitting there waiting for the cops to show up. You see somebody you're horrified of. You found your mom's dead body. You're kind of piecing it all together, and he busts out a fucking knife and is basically trying to stab you in the middle of the street with a neighbor intervening. I can't even imagine. Only in Brooklyn would this happen.
But it also bothers me that, like, the crime scene is 4 blocks away from her. The cop should have been there in 2 seconds.
2 seconds. And not to mention, exactly, 4 blocks away, a second murder. I mean, this isn't Brooklyn 1990 anymore. This is 2011. You know, the crime was already going down. So you would think that they would, you know, be like, holy shit.
They literally could have walked over from the original crime scene and been like, oh shit, let me just go to the next one. Like, it's inexcusable for them to have not shown up in a couple of minutes.
New York City cops ain't so smart, I'll tell you that much. The neighbors begin to wrestle with Gelman, but the monster who is full of drugs and adrenaline overpowers the neighbor. He somehow manages to get to Yelena and stabs and kills her right then and there with the very same knife he killed her mother with. He cut her from ear to ear, almost dismembering her head from her body. Firemen approach after all this chaos, and one of them sees Gelman flee and begins to take off after him, but again, he manages to get away.
Because he's on drugs and has like super strength and super speed or whatever else he
and
has.
Adrenaline, you know, think about a maniac that's able to kind of give in to all of his dark forces. It would be unstoppable for a time.
And
you know,
for the,
like
from the sounds of him, it sounds like every murder or everything that he does is just fueling him more. So at this point, he's on his third murder. He's already run somebody over. He's like Superman to himself. Like he just thinks like he's just
Robert De Niro from Taxi Driver. That's what he's thinking he is. Like,
and again, I'm going to point out that the firemen got there first, which is something that we know.
The two heroes in this story, aside from Anna, that I would say are always like the firemen who showed up and tried to find him, and the neighbor who tried to save Yelena's life. Like, I don't think they got enough credit because
they don't, because trying. That's your neighbor, and another person would, and I wouldn't have even gotten mad if another person just ran inside and called the cops and waited for them to show up, because it's a scary situation. You're putting your life on the line. But again, the firefighter, and I know from personal experience in times that I've called an ambulance, my mom called an ambulance for me once when I was younger. The firemen showed up. They're the ones who helped me. They put me on oxygen. They got me to the hospital, and I found out later from a neighbor that the cops didn't even show up for another 15 minutes. Granted, this was back when nobody really knew what panic attacks and anxiety was, and that's what I was having. But if something was really wrong with me, what the hell was I going to do waiting half an hour for cops, the NYPD and the regular ambulance? I got the FDNY ambulance and the FDNY EMTs, and if it wasn't for them, I would have just been sitting there waiting for a regular ambulance. And what?
I grew up 4 blocks away from a precinct, you know, by Prospect Park. One time we got robbed. They just took electronics, but of course we called just to file the complaint. The cops showed up 2 hours later. They're 4 blocks away from my house. They show up 2 hours later and they say to us, okay, we're going to come back with a fingerprint kit. Make sure you don't clean anything. 3 days later, we had not heard from anybody. And my mom is a clean freak, so we had to clean up the house. And of course, 2 or 3 days later, they show up with the fingerprint kit. And we're like, did you expect us to leave the house a complete mess for 6 days?
Yeah, they did.
Fingerprint?
Like, you grew up with a Hispanic mom, because we don't wait 6 days to clean.
Yeah. And what I don't understand is it's one of the most populated communities of police in New York City, and crime has gone down significantly at this point. So what constitutes an emergency other than someone saying, my mother was killed and there's a body in my house? What is more urgent than that?
And that was going to be my point. My point is, I know that they didn't show up to your house or my house because it wasn't technically an emergency, but this is something like an emergency and they still didn't show up. So there's no justification there. And I've had stuff happen like right outside my window where there was like a small fire, and I'm looking at the vehicles and you could tell what precinct they're from. I live in walking distance from a precinct, and I can tell you that all the cop cars outside were not even from the nearest precinct. They were from precinct somewhere else. And I'm like, there's a fucking fire going on. Why are you not here?
Absurd. So get this. This even goes to show you how insane this is. Gelman later claims he drove by once more after he killed Yelena.
Of course he did.
What the fuck? Does this guy have a horseshoe up his ass? Or is it truly like New York City cops just don't care? Because you already have the car. You know he's driving a 2004 Lexus. I'm sure there were witnesses that described exactly who he was. The cops are already 4 blocks away. And he drives by again and you don't see him? I don't understand how this happened.
And I'm sure at this point, it's been a few hours since the first crime. You have to have spoken to someone who told you that he might have been obsessed with this girl. So, like, how did you just let this happen?
I don't know. They have a lot that they never answer to. Let's put it that way. Gelman then decided to ditch his car by ramming into another car. And when the driver, Arthur DiCrescento, rolled down the window, Gelman stabbed him 3 times before carjacking the vehicle. After this, 62-year-old pedestrian Stephen Tenenbaum was innocently crossing the street and was run over by Gelman. He died of his injuries. So it's just all piling up at this point. When asked about these two victims, Gelman justified it simply by stating, quote, "I needed a car. It was a total accident. I wasn't stopping." Afterwards, Gelman abandoned DeCrescento's car just before 1 a.m. and hailed a livery cab before stabbing its driver, Fitz Fullerton. At this point, there is an all-out manhunt as night falls and police couldn't find him. Gelman claims he hid in the tunnels he knew from tagging. Some have even suggested he crashed at the site where he tagged Yelena's name. So even after killing her, his obsession didn't stop. Later into the night, he then approached another car with a couple inside and attacked the driver, Sheldon Pottinger, stabbing him multiple times in the hand. Sheldon initially tried to fight for his car, but decided the man driving at high speed, screaming and saying he would kill him, was scarier than jumping out of a moving vehicle. So he did that, somehow only sustaining injuries from the stab wounds and a few bruises. Something was looking out for him because
he got really lucky.
He could have been the fifth easy.
But at this point, it's nighttime, and he started at 5 a.m. with his stepfather.
It's 1 a.m. the following day.
So it's already been almost 24 hours.
20 something hours, yeah.
And he's not even that far from where it started, and it's crazy to me.
He then claims he stole Pottinger's vehicle, drove off in it, and says he's slept in it. The next morning, later in the, when the sun was actually out, the car wouldn't start. So he decided to go get breakfast, which included a hero and a soda somewhere in Queens. After eating, he claims he was spotted by one of those elusive feds that had been supposedly following him this entire time. So the funny thing about Gelman, despite all these crimes, despite all this stuff, he claims that the feds were watching him this entire time, but they didn't.
Right. They were just going to let you commit all of these crimes and let you do all of this stuff, but they were watching you the whole time. Yep. Right. Because that's exactly how it works.
Because the feds don't just take anybody down when it's justifiable. But anyway, he had the genius, and I do mean that caustically, plan of getting on a train, heading northbound into Manhattan, Vicky.
The most concentrated part of New York. No problem, dude.
The man who is all over the cover of newspapers and is being talked about for almost the last 24 hours goes into the most densely populated underground system in the world and thought that was safer. Is he just an idiot or just truly delusional at this point?
I think he's delusional, but at the same time, he's already gotten away with it for this long. So he's probably just whatever. I can get on a train and go to Manhattan and nobody's going to do anything.
And that goes to show you the trick in your brain for the power of suggestion with drugs is oriented and disillusioned about everything. He claims that the Fed continued to follow him onto the train and on the train, but somehow lost him.
Right.
How can you lose someone that was never there? On the train, he sees he is on the cover of all the newspapers and admits that he felt enjoyment from it.
Of course he did.
The one across from him, I believe it was the Post, because remember it had the manhunt, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
We remember
I remember.
We'll, of course, put up a picture of the headline.
We will. It was one of the few times I actually bought the newspaper.
The woman who was actually reading the paper about the madman looks up and realized it was him, and they both knew it.
That had to be so scary.
I would pee my pants. I
was just going to say that. While I was should I say it? Should I say it? I would shit myself. I would pee my pants. I don't know what I would do. I'd pass out. Something would happen.
But this woman was smart. So what she did, she gets off at the next stop, which would have been the thing to do because
she's smart. Because I wouldn't have even thought of just get off at the next stop.
No, because honestly, most people think when you change seats, you're safe. That's probably the logical person who was let me move away from him. No, fuck no. It was smart. Get off the fucking train.
Not only is it not safer, but sometimes it's worse because I personally know from all the people that are insane on the New York City subway system, if they make eye contact with you and then you move, then they get insulted that you moved, and then it just makes them yell at you. So you're just frozen in your spot. So I'm telling you, I honestly probably would have shit myself and then passed out. That would have been it.
This woman gets off on 86th Street in the city, and she alerts an officer. He gets almost to Times Square, and cops are waiting, knowing full well what train he is on. So you would think at this point, it would be okay, this is done. We know.
This is done, yeah.
Nope, not for Mad Max. They stop the train between stations, which may sound weird for those of you who have never taken the MTA, but that does happen all the time.
Yeah, a lot of it is just, we have a lot of different subways here and a lot of them merge into some of the bigger stations. So if it's even something like another train is coming on another track, you have to wait for that train to clear. There could be a train in front of you that just is still in the station. There's a million reasons why you get stuck in between stops.
So there are a million reasons, but Gelman knew this was about his capture. He's stupid, but he's not that stupid.
Right. For once, he was right about it being about him.
This De Niro taxi driver wannabe took off in the tunnels, running between trains, and somehow hopped onto the southbound train that had slowed on the other side.
I don't even know how that happened.
If I were on that train, I'd be like, what the actual fuck is happening? Like,
he definitely does have like some sort of luck, because I can tell you this because my boyfriend works for MTA. They had to have special like steel toe boots because the third rail it can electrocute you.
oh yeah.
And this motherfucker fucking runs through the tunnels where there is no light. You can't even tell which one is the third rail, and he didn't fucking get electrocuted. I mean, I'm kind of glad because he needs to suffer for what he did, but like he couldn't get electrocuted on third rail. If you don't live in New York, you don't know how insane it is for someone to do what he did.
So at this point, it's roughly 9:18 a.m. on a Saturday. He bangs on the conductor's door, hoping he can get away with saying he's a police officer and it's official business, and thinking he can hijack the fucking train. What movie does this guy think he's in where you can just put a knife to him and be like, I'm hijacking the train? Where are you going to go on a hijacked train? You're going to run into another train in the following stop. Like, what are you going to do? You think all of a sudden these trains are magically going to get out of your way? Like,
yes. Not to mention that the conductor's not the one that drives the train. The conductor's the one that opens and closes the door. The train operator all the way at the front of the train is the one that drives the train. So he couldn't hijack shit. What are you going to do? Open and close the doors repeatedly? He wasn't going to do shit.
To Gelman's surprise, the conductor doesn't open the door, but a New York City cop does.
Good.
Gelman took out a knife, but the police officer slams the door shut instead. Cops are always kind of a little more vigilant. He probably saw what was happening and said, fuck this, and closed the door, which to me sounded strange at first, but apparently cops have the right to protect themselves first.
Yeah.
So Gelman looks around and decides the next step is to take a hostage. This stupid idea would be the last one this fucker would get away with, though, so if that makes you feel any better.
A little bit.
He chooses the first guy in the seat closest to the conductor's door. But this guy he chooses as his hostage was 6'3", 270-pound Joe Lazito.
Good job.
Big enough to take down two guys on dust. Imagine, like, you're so fucking delusional. You turn and you know when you see a 6'3", 200-pound guy that he's a
even
big one.
sitting down,
crouching, doing a Thai squat. You can tell when they're big. Why? Why would you choose this guy?
Someone who's not 6'3" and 270 pounds. Like, this just goes into how delusional he was, because that's who he chose, and that's who he was like, oh, I could totally take this guy hostage. Like, yeah, okay.
So the guys start to prepare for battle, because like Joe actually talks about it on The Killer Speaks, and he says he turned to him and he knew. Like, it was just one of those New York City moments where you realize that shit's about to go down and you have to protect. Joe tries to aim for his legs and hits him in the waist, and then they begin to wrestle on the ground, and still somehow Gelman got on top of him and began stabbing him in the head. Joe has now suffered 7 stab wounds to the head, but he still continues fighting for his life. He said he kept going because he was thinking about his kids and his family. So I just think a lot of, even though your physical body might hurt, your mind is so powerful.
So powerful, because not only did you save your kids from being fatherless and like your family from missing you, how many lives did you save in New York? He was on his way to 42nd Street. Has anybody listening ever been to 42nd Street? Doesn't matter. In the winter, all it is tourists and hundreds and thousands of people, and he could have killed who knows how many people just trying to get away from whatever cops were following him. So he definitely saved a lot of lives that day.
Absolutely. So while all of this is going down and occurring, Joe's getting stabbed, they're kind of wrestling. The cop who hid in the conductor's booth saw his opening, drew his gun, and pointed at Gelman, prompting him to finally stop his 28-hour crime spree. Gelman also believes, like I said before, that the feds let him do this crime. Right. And he was followed and they knew where he was at all times, you know? Feds were following me. They knew what the hell I was doing. Why am I in trouble? I don't know. You know, these people always try to blame somebody else.
Never their fault.
So again, through multiple sources, including the Brooklyn DA, they denied having such information on Gelman at the time of his arrest. Gelman got examined for a possible insanity offense, but he was found not to be crazy. The fucker even said so himself. He was like, no, that's for crazy people. Like, I'm not crazy. Again, lack of empathy is a big thing with sociopaths, and it just goes to show you he can kill someone he was in love with, he can blame all these other people, he can do all of this and say, no, I'm not crazy. Anybody else that wanted to slightly get away with something would just try to act crazy. No, he was completely okay with basically saying, I'm a sociopath and I don't give a fuck. So he was found guilty of 4 counts of murder, and throughout the trial and sentencing, he kept talking and laughing, taunting Yelena's friends and family, and was let out of the room cackling once he received a 225-year sentence. When asked if he felt sorry and felt remorse, Gelman said, quote, I was upset I was caught. That's about it. What's done is done. This is Maxim Gelman, a man who should never see the light of day. And FYI, there are rumors that he has Yelena's photo up in his cell, which to me, I think should be against the law. Like the same way that They had that dad that killed those kids and the wife and kids in Colorado.
Chris Watts. Yeah, and he has the picture of his whole family in his cell.
And people are complaining about that. I think the rules should be changed to, if you kill somebody, you can't have a shrine to them because you're just reliving your crime. Criminals shouldn't be allowed to do that. You shouldn't, looking at somebody that you claim you were in love with and killing somebody is just demented, and that shouldn't be legal.
Especially because, he's not even sorry. If he was somebody that was super remorseful, that might be another form of torture, and I'd be like, fine, leave it up on the wall, suffer. But he doesn't give a shit. He's not even sorry that he did it. So he's really just he's getting pleasure out of looking at that picture, and he shouldn't have an ounce or second of pleasure for the rest of his life.
I agree. And despite Brooklyn being a major city, those who live there now, especially those of us that grew up there, you're somehow always connected to everybody. Despite Brooklyn being so big, it is still so small. How we connected was literally we knew friends from 1 degree apart before we met each other. You know what I mean?
Everybody is
somehow know each other. But I'm lucky enough to honestly say that I never knew this man personally, but I feel like I've seen him since I do know people that know Yelena. Brooklyn is just way too small for me not to have interacted with him, or at least somebody that knew him personally, and that freaks me the hell out. So I've been wanting to cover this case for a while. Yeah. So I hope you guys got some crazy insight into what it's like to really live in Brooklyn, because it's not all what you see on TV. There is some crazy shit that will always go down here. And then
there's boring parts where absolutely nothing fucking happens. So it's weird.
Yeah, if you can afford to live there, good for you.
Yeah, but the crazy thing about him is that he's the type of person that either one of us could have run into, because I used to go to that area all the time. It is not that far from me now, but my best friend, the mother of my godson, she lived in Sheepshead Bay. Her mom's mom lived there. Everybody lived there. So I used to go there very frequently. And when I say very frequently, to the point where I had a key, that's how often I used to go there. And I feel like I could have very easily walked right by him and not notice, because he's so fucking ordinary. There's nothing special about this man. Nothing that he would how sometimes you walk by somebody and you're like, that dude is crazy, and you remember it later. No, you could walk by this dude a million times and be like, I've never seen him in my life, because he is so ordinary. And that's what's so crazy about it, because it really, when that was going down, you really looked at his picture like, have I ever seen him? Did I ever run into him? You don't know. And I was just, it was just way too close for comfort. And I remember when I did the Son of Sam episode, one of the things that was crazy to me was I don't know what I would have done if he was that close to me at that time, but this was our version of that. The same way people were scared during the Son of Sam era to go out to clubs. Granted, it was only 28 hours, but people in Brooklyn were fucking scared because we didn't know the connection between him and Yelena and stuff, because they don't tell you that. But it was just a dude from Brooklyn that was going crazy and just killing people. That's all you knew about it.
Like a 28-hour Son of Sam from Brooklyn. That's what it felt like.
That's what it was. We're going to go to the Who Does That, because I need to feel better.
Let's do it.
Who does that?
Who does that? Who does that? Who does that?
This Who Does That it's from back in June, and I had it in my phone for a while, and I don't know why I never did it, but it's really fucking hilarious. It's from TorontoSun.com, and the headline reads, Amish man hit with DUI after sideswiping car with buggy. It still makes you laugh. She's also laughing more because she's seen the picture, and seriously, drunk Amish dude, it's he pops in your head. That's exactly what he looks like.
No, literally think of any Amish man you've ever seen with red cheeks. That's literally
yeah, that's exactly what it is. We will post a picture up. It is hilarious. An allegedly hammered Amish man was charged with driving under the influence of alcohol after his horse and buggy sideswiped a car in Kentucky, which I didn't even know there were Amish people in Kentucky. Cops say Reuben Yoder, 34, was arrested after they responded to a crash. Also riding in the buggy were his wife, Salome Yoder, and 7 children. I didn't know a buggy fit this many people, who range in age from 9 months to 12 years old. According to police, Yoder allegedly sideswiped the car and damaged its front bumper.
What was dented, the buggy or the horse? Because
right?
the horse in front of the buggy.
What part was really hurt? Initially, Yoder told officers, get this, that one of his children had been steering the buggy, and then the kids denied it and told the police that their father was the culprit.
Hold on. Wait, you tried to pin it on your children? Wow. Father of the fucking year, bro. Seriously.
And those kids are like, no. I didn't fucking do that shit. I'm not getting in trouble.
Isn't June's Father's Day? Be like, Happy Father's Day, Dad.
You know what's funny? I think that was really around Father's Day. It's I'm not doing that shit for you. I wouldn't do it either. None of them were injured in the crash. During field sobriety tests, officers at the scene determined that Yoder had been boozing. He allegedly had bloodshot eyes, which you can see in that picture, and was slurring. Quote, Yoder exhibited poor balance and stated he had consumed alcoholic beverages, cops said in an arrest citation. He also refused a drug test at a local hospital. He was charged with 9 counts of first-degree wanton endangerment, a count each of first-degree criminal mischief, and operating a non-motor vehicle while under the influence of intoxicants. Kentucky's Amish population has been growing steadily over the past 2 decades, with a total of 8,000 people living in more than 30 settlements.
I would have never guessed that Kentucky has Amish people, first of all. And second of all, I'm surprised he didn't. Is there a rule or like a law against trying to pin your crime on your children? That should be one. Because
he should have been charged with like a count of being a bad father. Like, why would you do that?
Honestly, it's so stupid. And think about it this way too. So we have a guy in the buggy that was drunk. We had the guy that was on the lawnmower that got a DUI. Basically, if you're not on your legs or in an Uber or a Lyft, don't get behind anything that can get you from A to B that's not your feet. Because you can get a DUI for anything. Who would think a buggy would be a cause? How fast can those things go? But it doesn't matter. You're drunk, you shouldn't be operating.
The funny thing is, like, I've ridden a horse before and they usually know where they're going. So how drunk were you that you led the horse in the wrong direction? Like, really?
What's the wrong direction? Are you like crossing through a field? Like, my thing is like, how is it so apparent that someone's drunkenly driving around a horse? How obvious did it have to be that you're that wasted? And that's my thing. Like, you had to be like really trying hard, because horses are smart animals. They know how to go in a straight line. So
pretty sure he knew not to, like, the horse knew not to go into the police vehicle, but you know.
Seriously, Yoder, stay in your population. Don't you're not gonna make it out in this real world, clearly. Because I don't think they're supposed to drink. I don't think they're supposed
I don't really know if the Amish are supposed to drink, but I'm almost positive. No, you know what? No matter what, Amish or not, please don't drink and drive anything.
Yeah.
Don't get behind a lawnmower. Don't get behind a horse and buggy. Don't get in a car. Don't get on a scooter. You know what? Some people aren't really safe walking. Just lay down and go to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. You're safer there. I promise. Because you can't get arrested for sleeping. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Please like, subscribe, check us out on social media. We also would love to hear from you guys, theearieamericas@gmail.com.
Oh, we would like to hear from, like, some crazy stories to read. Please send us some interesting emails. Leave us a comment on Instagram or a review on Apple Podcasts. We would greatly appreciate it. But most importantly,
stay weird, Americas.
Bye.
Bye.